When I come around, got the whole thing wobbing.
On Tuesday, and he was not suspended. His license was revoked. He was fined $205,000. He has his USADA hearing at another point in time. And I guess the reason why he didn't get the book thrown at him is because the Turinabol in his system, he passed a test weeks before his fight, failed the weigh-in test, and then passed the previous test the next day. And so that made them say, all right, John, we believe you. The Turinabol was not in your system on purpose. It had to have been an accident. Do you agree with Andy Foster, the California commissioner, with that reason for not throwing the book at him?
No, I don't think that's the reason they didn't throw the book at him. I think the reason is because he didn't have a what they call exceptional circumstances argument, meaning when he came in and said, well, where did this come from? Can you give us another product that may have been contaminated so we can independently buy a bottle and match the numbers on them and determine that would cause the positive? He basically said, I don't know where I got it. And he had one of the best anti-doping lawyers that I know of, Howard Jacobs, representing him. And I find it interesting that they show up and say, we have no clue. So he didn't provide any sort of explanation at all. And there are other cases where people have tested positive for anabolic steroids that have been exonerated because they could show which supplements that they were taking and that caused the positive drug test. And there was some sort of in exceptional circumstances, like a video of somebody breaking into your room, injecting a steroid into your toothpaste or something. But he had no explanation whatsoever. So I have my theories about how this contamination occurred, if you'd like to hear those.
Yes, please.
We would love to.
Okay. So generally what happens in these cases where nobody can figure it out is somewhere in an underground steroid lab where you would buy this stuff on the internet somewhere, when they make these various anabolic steroids and other performance-enhancing drugs, they use glassware and they heat them up. And they may make a batch of testosterone, and then they make a batch of Dianabol, and then they make a batch of Primobolan, and then they make a batch of Turinabol. And you end up with what they call cross-contamination. Now, you're supposed to wash the glassware with very, very strong acids. Typically, they use a 50-50 nitric perchloric acid mixture that does everything but leach the glass out of the bottles. So oftentimes in these underground clandestine labs, they don't use good policies for cleaning their glassware. And you have to understand that they're measuring in parts per trillion. This is ultra trace amounts that they're finding. Mm-hmm. So here's typically what happens. Now people have moved to using endogenous, mainly testosterone, as an anabolic, and of course then other things like IGF-1 long R3, or they do stem cell injections. There's all sorts of things that are very difficult to detect. And of course they can microdose and get below the radar with these. But the problem is they think they're taking testosterone, but it has been made in an underground lab, and that testosterone product is contaminated with traces of nandrolone or Turinabol or Dianabol or some other type of anabolic steroid. So to get that in your system and understand, they have something called a mass spectrogram fragmentation pattern. This is like a fingerprint. And it's not really a quantitative test, it's a qualitative test, meaning you're either pregnant or you're not. It's either there or it's not. So it was in the system. Now, I don't think he's stupid enough to inject it intentionally, but is it possible that he may have injected a microdose of testosterone that was contaminated with Turinabol? I think that is a possibility.
So in layman's terms, Victor, you think he probably injected himself with another banned PED, and that was contaminated with another banned PED that made no sense to be in his system and was harder to flush out?
And Turinabol is in both injectable as well as oral. So when they use the same equipment when they make these tablets as well. So they might make oxandrine, also known as Anavar or oxandrolone, or Wenstrol, or Turinabol. You know, Turinabol, if you know much about it, it's the little blue vitamin that the East Germans were given to young kids back in the 1970s. This has been around for decades and decades. But what happens is these guys that are selling stuff on the internet, and they're manufacturing these underground products in their basements or in their bathtubs or in their kitchens. And at some point, he got exposed to it. And obviously it's not intentional, but my sense is he likely was doing some other bad stuff that brought this along as in a trace amount.
Raindrop, drip, drop top, top smoking, no cooking, the hot pot.